They've been pushed to it by us, they've been pushed to it by consumers, and they've been pushed to it by their own constituents, of course. The press has run a whole series of articles on the unfairness, and that too has pushed the government. Mr. Speaker, I understand you have another introduction.
Yes, the member for Halifax-Shabukta was quite generous this morning as he's permitting another introduction. The Honourable, well, as usual, yes, the Honourable, the member for Pictou East on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member from Halifax-Shabukta to yield his time. I'd like to bring to your attention in the East Gallery two longtime friends, retired members, the government, and both on the executive of the Retired Members Association, and Bernie LaRusick on standing, and Bernie once his team once beat the premiers in Glasgow in 1952. I'm not giving away ages here, have I, Bernie? And Steve MacDonald. Can I ask the House to recognize them in the usual manner?
Yes, and welcome to the gentleman as introduced by the MLA for Pictou East. If they're friends of the MLA for Pictou East, they must be very fine gentlemen. Welcome indeed. Welcome to all our guests in the gallery. The Honourable, the member for Halifax-Shabukta.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity to continue. We were attempting to explore what actually led to the large increases in automobile insurance for rates for Nova Scotians. And there is a competition when it comes to the explanations. I was pointing out that on the one hand, we hear from the insurance industry in Canada that it has to do with soft tissue claims and their costs associated with that. On the other hand, we hear from many other voices that the essential reason is problems with their investments. Well, I've had a look at this to the best that I can over the last number of months. In fact, I think you and I were together, Mr. Speaker, in one of the legislature committees when we heard from the representatives of the insurance industry, and we engaged with them on this issue probably about 6 months ago. And we pointed out to them, I certainly did at the time, that all of the literature seemed to indicate that their problems were really with their investments. And I want to turn to that for just a moment. And I want to remind the members of this House, as I have on a couple of other occasions, of what is the normal practice when it comes to property and casualty insurance companies. Property and casualty insurance is a different category from life insurance. The financial side of the life insurance industry is a different picture, and life insurance companies are not the same as property and casualty insurance companies. Property and casualty insurance companies are the ones that deal with automobile insurance. And I had a look at the website of the federal government's Department of Finance to read about property and casualty insurance companies. And in their description of this segment of the financial industry of Canada, they made what to me was a very striking statement. And please recall, Mr. Speaker, that this statement was made as part of a multi-page general description of the property and casualty insurance industry as it operates in Canada. It wasn't a featured item. It was simply part of the normal, routine description that the Federal Department of Finance offered for how they saw property and casualty insurance companies operating. What they said was that it is normal, that it is usual, that it is the expected thing that in any given year, these insurance companies will pay out more in claims than they take in premiums. That's normal business for these insurance companies. They went on to say in this Federal Department of Finance website that the way these companies make their money is through their investments in the stock market, in the bond market, in mortgages. That's how they make their money. Now, if that's the case, then it cannot be any kind of effective argument for the insurance companies to come and say, we paid out more money this year than we took in premiums. That can't be an argument for putting up their premiums if that's the normal way they do business. They get to hold on to this money for a while before they pay out their claims, and they invest it in the interim. Plus, they have cumulative other amounts that they have generated over the many decades in which those companies have been in existence. And they invest that money. Most of their revenue, most of their profits come from their investments. We should make no mistake. These companies are profitable. They're not losing money. From their perspective, the issue is how much money they make, the extent of their profits. It's not that they're losing money. What they're saying is they're not making as much money as they would like to make. They're not making as much money as they made a few years ago. They're not making as much money as if they were a bank or a trust company. Well, you know what? Too bad. Historically, property and casualty insurance companies don't make as much money as banks or trust companies. Their rate of return is around 8% compared to 10 or 12% for banks or trust companies. Well, when the stock market and the bond market and the mortgage market were doing very well for them, they were beginning to increase that number. They were beginning to increase their historical pattern of 8% return up to about 10% of return. They were beginning to do very well on their investments, and they were beginning to have a taste for it. Their stockholders were having a taste for it, and their executives were having a taste for it. And now that the stock market whacked them upside the head a little bit, they went back down to 10%, and in some cases, or to 8% rather, and in some cases a little bit below that. They don't like it. And that is what it is that is leading them to say to Nova Scotians, we want you to pay more. They're saying to us, we want you to pay more so that the value of our stock will go up. We want you to pay more so that the dividends we pay to our shareholders can go up. We want you to pay more so that the remuneration to our senior executives can go up. They're not saying, we want you to pay more so we can give you better service. They're not saying, we want you to pay more so we can pay you more if you're injured. They're not saying, we're going to improve our service in some way. They're simply saying, we want you to pay more. And indeed, they tend to couple that with a promise that they're going to give you less service because they claim that the underlying reason for the increase in premiums is that they're having to pay out too much in soft tissue injuries. So they're saying, we want you to pay more, and if we had our way, we would pay less back to you for your claims. Now that's it in its starkness. And it isn't justified. And Nova Scotians know that it's not justified. And Nova Scotians are not about to put up with it. Finally, after months of talking and wrangling, finally, after months of this party leading action by calling for an inquiry through the limited legal mechanism that we have now in place in Nova Scotia, the UARB, the government took some action. Fully a year ago, it was more than a year ago because it was in January or February of 2002, when we called for a public inquiry through the Utility and Review Board to look at the rates that were being routinely filed with the board by the insurance companies. The minister who was then responsible for insurance said, nope. The minister who was then responsible for insurance said, that isn't going to happen. The minister who was then responsible for insurance said, let the marketplace take care of itself. My head hurts when I have to think about this problem. But public pressure grew, and within 3 weeks, the Premier was forced to change his mind and order this matter dealt with by the Utility and Review Board. But let's look at that. First, of course, this was ordered on February 2002, and here it is, the middle of May 2003, and there's still no ruling from the Utility and Review Board. The Utility and Review Board started its hearings in September. The hearings finished after a month or two, and there's no ruling, no guidance, no observation, no analysis, nothing yet from the Utility and Review Board. Clearly, although we look to the Utility and Review Board ultimately to do a good job on this issue, this is a slow process and an inadequate process. The lesson we learn from this is that the mechanism that is in place right now, the existing system, which is after the fact review by the Utility and Review Board, but only if ordered by the minister, and only then through a public hearing, and without a consumer advocate there to speak on behalf of the public interest. Clearly, the existing system is not an adequate system. But we do look for good advice from the Utility and Review Board when it finally does report. Yet the important thing to note about this process is that the government had to be forced into it through clamoring. The government did not voluntarily want to even use the mechanism that was there for it to use all the time. It was reluctant to do that. This issue, of course, has not gone away during the time that the Utility and Review Board has been dealing with it. Because it's been going on so long, the insurance companies have continued to file their next annual increases. And we've seen whole instances of this going on. So when one thinks about what are the possibilities in terms of regulation and dealing with the problem, one possibility is the system we have in place right now. But we've seen how reluctant the government is to act. We've seen how slow the Utility and Review Board is to move ahead with it. We have yet to see their results, and we know that that system doesn't operate with a designated consumer advocate to speak up for the public in Nova Scotia, the insurance buying public in Nova Scotia. Well, what other alternatives are there? One alternative is the alternative that we have in front of us now in Bill 45. Now, Bill 45 is an ad hoc, once-off, temporary freeze, interference with what the insurance companies would otherwise wish to do. Now, do we want to continue to have a system in which we have to rely upon ad hoc pieces of legislation that might or might not come forward? Is that a way to deal with these kinds of problems? Now, we know that this question of automobile insurance is not going away. If there's any striking fact about the change in social life in North America and worldwide for the last 100 years, it is that it has become a car culture. Ever since automobiles began to be mass-produced, they have taken over our lives. We build highway systems in order to accommodate them. We build our homes to accommodate them. Many people have such an affection for their automobiles that if they could keep them in their bedrooms and park them beside their desks at work, they would do that. They have become such an integrated part of our lives that we spend enormous amounts of money on roads, on highways, on accidents, on insurance. They drive urban planning. They drive, literally, the way in which we can live and where we can go to work. Parking becomes another problem. If there's anything that's striking about the last 100 years, it's that we've had to reorient ourselves around the car. And our cities have been built around them, our towns have been built around them, even the countrysides have been built around them. And another aspect of it, of course, is insurance, because they're dangerous. Accidents happen all the time, and they're expensive items. If they're dinged, seriously or not seriously, they're expensive to fix. If people are injured, there's potential for enormous damage to people, and accidents are hugely frequent. The number of deaths on the road is enormous. The number of injuries is enormous. This drives up the cost of our healthcare system. It's a cost to the economy. We know all of that. And because we know this, one of the things that has become universal public policy is the requirement that anyone who drives carries insurance. They have to carry insurance because there are accidents. They have to carry insurance because there are so many accidents. Well, that brings us engaged with this issue. If we know we can't escape it, we know we have to do something about this, and we know, because we've heard from the insurance companies, that they have a desire to continue increasing their rates. What are we going to do? Are we going to meet in this legislature every year and discuss a new Bill 45 that's going to freeze or perhaps maybe blessedly roll back the insurance rates? And on what basis is the government going to do that? We haven't even heard a real explanation, apart from clamor, public clamor, as to what the government thinks it's going to accomplish through a freeze. Well, we know that they will freeze some rates during that time, but have they said to us what the rates ought to be? They haven't said to us what the rates ought to be. They haven't told us what their target is for insurance rates. They haven't even told us a target range for insurance rates. Have we heard a number from the government that says insurance rates in this company are X% too high? We haven't heard that. Or for some other company, a Y% too high? We haven't heard that kind of analysis. What's the government going to do? Just bring in some kind of special legislation every year? And what's it going to take? The kind of massive lobbying through the newspapers, by our party, through the mail-out campaign that we've engaged in, through relentless questions in question period? What's it going to take to get a government to act? Well, you know what? Ad hoc legislation like Bill 45 every year isn't the answer. No. It's not the answer. It's not the way to go. Is there some other alternative? Well, perhaps before I turn to two other alternatives I can name, let me just look at a couple of the problems that I haven't even mentioned with the freeze. One, of course, is that it doesn't affect those increases that were filed by the companies prior to May 1st.
There you go.
And all of us
Here's a salient
have
point.
had calls from people
Guess what?
who read about in the newspaper about the freeze
There's another exception.
and who then contacted their insurance brokers in anticipation of the time about to come when they had to buy renewals of their insurance, hoping that there would be a freeze in place. Unfortunately, the brokers were caught in the middle between the insurance companies, the government, and their customers as consumers, and they had to break the bad news. The bad news they had to break to many of their clients was that the freeze doesn't affect them because they're insured with a company which had filed its increase before May 1st. And for the customer who had thought that they were okay because their policy came up for renewal sometime in May, sometime in June, sometime in July,
Wrong again.
they thought the freeze would help them. Nope. They found out that because their company had filed for their increase prior to May 1st, even though their policy doesn't come up for renewal until later in May, later in June, later in July, they still have to pay the increase. Now, all of us have had calls from members of the public who are caught in that situation. They don't like it.
Absolutely.
So that freeze is not exactly effective. Furthermore, there are ways, a large number of ways, for the companies to get around those freezes. They can put people in particular categories. There's nothing to stop them putting people in special categories. They're virtually unfettered when it comes to that. Or, and this is my favorite, they simply look at it and say, well, your car's a year older.
Yeah, so are you.
It's perhaps a little more dangerous to be driving your car now. And it might have gone down a little bit in value, but it's now a little more dangerous. So although our rates are frozen, we'll put you in a different category so far as your car is concerned. Well, there are just too many ways around this freeze for it to be effective. Sounds good, but that's all we can really say about the freeze, is that it sounds good. Whenever you have a good hard look at it, it doesn't work. It vanishes. It's like smoke. It's insubstantial. You blow at it, floats away. And believe me, the insurance companies are going to be doing little more than just puff at it a little bit. Well, what other alternatives are there? There are two other alternatives. There's what's called pre-approval of the rates. Now, we don't have that system right now. What we have is a registration system right now. If insurance companies want to put up their rates, they just send letters to the Utility and Review Board listing their rates. If the government is moved to order an inquiry, then the Utility and Review Board can, after the fact, inquire into the matter. But a different system would be pre-approval. Pre-approval would say that if an insurance company wants to increase its rates, then it has to get the specific approval of the Utility and Review Board or some similar body after a full-scale public inquiry, public hearing rather, into the matter. Now, would that be a good system? Well, it would certainly be a better system than the one we have now. And it would certainly be a better system than something like Bill 45, which essentially means ad hoc stopgap measures. And a number of jurisdictions do have good pre-approval systems. I think particularly about the California system. Consumer advocate Ralph Nader was in town last week, and he pointed out the virtues of the system as it exists in California. This is a pre-approval system. And I think when a person of Ralph Nader's experience and qualifications and accomplishments directs our attention to a system, we should pay attention. And we have looked at that system, and I have to say it has much of virtue about it. Mr. Nader was certainly right. I think, however, there is yet another alternative. The alternative, and as long as we're appealing to the authority of Mr. Nader here, I should say that it's an alternative that he endorses as well, is the possibility of a driver-owned system. This is something that our party is looking at very seriously. It's known also as a public automobile insurance scheme. Now, that's another alternative, and I'm not going to go into details about how that would work. We're looking at it. It exists in 3 provinces in Canada, and those are the provinces that have both the lowest rates and the fairest rates. And when I say fairest, I mean that they are prohibited from discriminating against people on the basis of age, either old age or youth. They're prohibited from discriminating against people except on the basis of relevant matters. They're told that they can set their categories according to the value of the car that you drive and according to your personal driving record, and in some limited circumstances, according to where you live. That is, do you live in the big city or do you live in a smaller area where there might be fewer vehicles and historically fewer accidents? But they can't discriminate on the basis of age, and that's an important matter. So that's what I mean by fairness. So when we look at the existing public auto systems, that is publicly owned or driver-owned automobile insurance plans in Canada, in BC, in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba, the preliminary indications are very compelling that we should be looking at that here. As long as I've mentioned this, I think it's important, Mr. Speaker, that I point out that driver-owned or public auto schemes are not the same thing as no fault. No fault is, of course, a different question entirely. No fault is the issue of whether litigation over individual damage is to continue or whether there is a set scale of fees and compensation to be paid. Whether a system is public or private It might also be a no-fault or not a no-fault scheme. There are separate issues that have to be debated quite separately, and they involve a lot of analysis, both of them. So I'm not, again, going to get into that, but I do want to make it clear to people that anyone who advocates for a driver-owned or publicly owned automobile insurance scheme is not automatically, by any means, also advocating for a no-fault scheme. That everyone has to bear that in mind. These are separate issues and have to be debated separately. So this brings us back to the question of what it is that Bill 45 does. I've tried to outline that strikingly, what we see in Bill 45 is the government moving to do something that it regularly tells us it doesn't like to do. It regularly tells us it doesn't like to interfere with the private marketplace. Particularly the minister who is now responsible for insurance matters is a strong advocate of the virtues of the private marketplace. And many of us would agree with him within the appropriate sphere. And yet, he and his government have taken this extraordinary step through Bill 45 to freeze insurance rates. And we have to recognize what it is that has driven this government to take a step to interfere within what would normally be the free interaction of the marketplace, in which the private insurance companies could set their rates, and customers, if they don't like it, could take their business somewhere else. Well, clearly what's happened is that the public demand has been for the government to do something. The public demand, unrelentingly over the last year and a half, has been for the government to do something. They finally have. Is it adequate? I don't think so. In my comments, Mr. Speaker, I've tried to set out what I think are the alternatives. Clearly, the system that we have right now, the system of mere registration with the Utility and Review Board, is not adequate. The alternative represented by Bill 45 of ad hoc decisions from time to time doesn't do it either. There are two other possibilities: the system of pre-approval and the system of a driver-owned automobile insurance company. Both of those last two are the only two that really seem worthwhile to investigate when it comes to serious, long-lasting, beneficial change to the automobile insurance system in Nova Scotia. Earlier on, I pointed out that insurance is a complicated, international business. It's something to be approached with respect. It's something to be approached carefully. But if we are to take effective steps in our own province to protect our own people, then it is not beyond our abilities to do that. We simply have to craft the solution in an appropriate way. And if it means we have to move away from being so tied to an international system, then so be it. If it means we have to take charge of automobile insurance rates for Nova Scotians in Nova Scotia through the mechanism of a driver-owned system, then so be it. That, in fact, is what the government is here for. That is the value of having a government that responds to the people's needs. That's the job of the government. The job of the government is to recognize when people need help with the pocketbook issues that they have to struggle with from day to day. It is not the case that government is powerless. It is not the case that the government has no alternatives. It is not the case that power resides somewhere else, wherever that somewhere else might be, and we can't, in a small province, admittedly a small province, do anything about it. I don't believe that. If I believed that, I wouldn't be in politics. Because someone who believes that government has no function. or if they believe that it has a function, it's a really tiny function. That's not my view of government. My view is that government can do things. My view is that the people of Nova Scotia ought to be able to look to their government to act for them when it's necessary. In fact, it's my belief that the people of Nova Scotia should be able to look to their government to have taken proactive steps before the troubles come, to have thought on their behalf in advance, to have put regulations and protections in place, to have looked out for them when it comes to occupational health and safety, something worth remembering on the anniversary of West Ray facing this government.
Right on.
The people of Nova Scotia should be able to have to look to their government to have taken steps to protect and to be stewards for the environment, not to wait for disasters to strike, but to act in advance. And when it comes to the economic realm, the people of Nova Scotia should look to their government and expect their government to take effective steps, whatever the ambit of those steps might be. We can't be shy about this. If we have to take the step of setting up a driver-owned system, then let's do it. But this alternative, the one we have in front of us in Bill 45, isn't up to scratch. It's ad hoc, it's inadequate, and the voters of Nova Scotia see through it. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Are there further interventions on Bill 45? The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour to close debate on Bill number 45.
I'm pleased to move a second reading of Bill 45. I'd like to thank members who participated in the debate. And, Mr. Speaker, I look for speedy passage of the bill because then we can get on with regulatory requirements to put in effect for insurance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The motion is for second reading of Bill number 45, the Insurance Act. Is the House ready for the question? Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 45, an act to amend Chapter 231 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Insurance Act.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Speaker, I request the concurrence of the House to revert to the order of business.
Please, it's difficult to hear the Honourable the Government House Leader.
I'll try and speak up, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I'm requesting the consensus of the House to revert the order of business presenting reports of committees. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Chairman of the Committee on Law Amendments, I am directed to report the committee has met and considered the following bill. Bill number 36, an act respecting certain financial measures. The committee recommends this bill to favourable consideration of the House with certain amendments.
Order, please. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call the order of business private members' public bills for second reading?
Yes, I must, Honourable Government House Leader, I apologize to intervene. I shall read into the record that Bill number 36, an act respecting certain financial measures, has been, by the Chairman of the Committee, reported to the Committee, and the Committee has met, and the bill has received favourable consideration. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yeah, referred to the committee, yeah. Yes, Mr. Speaker. Now, would you please call private members' public bills for second reading?
Private members' bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 50, an act respecting interior designers?
Bill number 50, an act respecting interior designers. The Honourable the Member for Halifax, Bedford Basin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in my place to speak on Bill 50, an act respecting interior designers. This legislation will recognize interior designers as serious professionals, Mr. Speaker, who work very hard to maintain high standards and excellence. They have invested a great deal of time and energy to bring this legislation forward, as evidenced by their continued presence with us this morning. And, Mr. Speaker, with that, it is my pleasure to move second reading of Bill 50.
The Honourable the Member for Halifax, Shabukto.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to just offer a couple of comments, if I may, about the creation of a new self-regulating profession. I know we've had a number of guests here in the gallery today to watch the proceedings because they're particularly concerned with this bill. I want to say that I wish the interior designers well in setting up a new profession, a new self-regulating profession. Right. And I'm only taking a moment to speak on this bill because I myself participate in a profession that is self-regulating. And I want, because there are present in the gallery today some members of the profession, to offer some comments to them about how important it is that they think very carefully and act very carefully whenever they deal with the full range of responsibilities that they are being given. Because they are being given serious legal responsibilities. They're being given the responsibility to decide about education standards for people who will practice their profession. And that is tied, of course, to the credit of their profession, to the ability of their profession to gain respect among the general public. That's a serious undertaking, and one that they have to enter into with care, caution, and with a degree of professionalism that will do themselves credit. The other thing that they are being given by way of a power is the power of admission and, to a limited extent, therefore, of discipline of their own members. Now, any self-regulating body that has the power over admission and therefore of licensing has a serious economic power over the lives of their members or those who would like to become their members. That's a power that has to be exercised in a careful, in a balanced, and I would say in a judicial fashion. And I would urge those who come to exercise that power to think very carefully about how they set up that process, to think about including those who have perhaps expertise from other self-regulating professions, to think about including members of the public, to think always about their rights and responsibilities and the stamp of fundamental fairness that must always adhere to any proceedings when they deal with their members. Some professions, even professions like law, medicine, and teaching, which to some extent are self-regulating, have run into problems when it comes to respecting the rights of their members, when it's come to a question of how to hold hearings and inquiries. I know this may be jumping ahead to something that may never arise or that may arise over very infrequently, but I want the members of this newly created profession, which will have powers of self-regulation, to ask themselves about these questions, to think about these questions. And as I said at the beginning of my comments, I wish them all very well in their endeavors. Thank you. Absolutely.
Member for Cape Breton South.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to rise for a few moments in support of the bill that was tabled earlier today in the House, and to suggest that my comments would be a little bit longer or perhaps more relevant, Mr. Speaker, if we had a copy of the bill. You know, we just now are getting copies of the bill. I don't know what happened earlier, but we did agree to have the bill tabled in the House today because we feel it's important that that this bill be given due consideration, and our party will be supporting this bill at second reading. Thank you.
The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to point out on behalf of our caucus that I know that the members of the Interior Design Group had some discussions with our staff at caucus with the bill. It's my understanding that they have had letters of support from a number of different organizations issuing support, and I commended them on that, and I believe the government had told them it was the best and prudent approach to take because, Speaker, you'd be aware of a few other pieces of legislation that organizations have brought here that we all thought was supported, only to find out at law amendments that there wasn't very much support for it at all, and that that was a surprise not only to government but for our caucuses also. But it's my understanding that this bill has been discussed with other organizations and that support is there. This is pretty much bringing this legislation to the back into the year 2003 and better reflecting the today's market that these individuals work in. So we do certainly appreciate the fact that they did bring this to our attention, to our caucus. I certainly want to thank our staff member, Alan McAvoy, who did have discussions with them and reviewed the legislation and the supporting documentation with it. And we certainly look forward to this bill making it to law amendments, and hopefully no surprises when we get to law amendments, and that we can see a speedy passage of this particular piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the honourable member for Halifax Bedford Basin be to close debate on Bill number 50.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. I thank the honourable members for their kind comments, and I move to close debate on second reading.
Motion is for second reading of Bill number 50. Is the House ready for the question? All ready? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 50, an act respecting interior designers.
Order this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, will you please call the order of business public bills, private and local bills for second reading.
Private and local bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, do we do these in block or in block? Is it suitable? Okay, Mr. Speaker, I'm calling for a second reading of Bill number 29, Bill number 34, Bill number 35, Bill number 37, Bill number 40, Bill number 44, Bill number 47, Bill number 48, and Bill number 51. Mr. Speaker, I move second reading.
Order, please. The clerk, if the Honourable Government House Leader would read those bills over slowly, because the clerk wasn't able to get the numbers.
They're right off the order paper in the order that they're on the order paper, Mr. Speaker. Bill number 29, Bill number 34, Bill number 35, Bill number 37, Bill number 40, Bill number 44, Bill number 47, Bill number 48, and Bill number 51.
So the motion is for second reading of those bills listed by the Honourable Government House Leader. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 29, an act to amend Chapter 103 of the Acts of 1981, the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities Act. Bill number 34, an act to amend Chapter 94 of the Acts of 1958, the Riverport District Fire Protection Act. Bill number 35, an act to amend Chapter 234 of the Acts of 1906, an act to incorporate the Truro Golf Club. Bill number 37, an act to authorize the town of Hantsport to make a grant to the Hantsport Memorial Community Center. Bill number 40, an act to amend Chapter 141 of the Acts of 1918, an act to amend and consolidate the acts respecting the Sisters of St. Martha. Bill number 44, an act to amend Chapter 153 of the Acts of 1919, an act to incorporate the Old Presbyterian Church Cemetery Company of Chipman Corner in Cornwallis, Kings County. Bill number 47, an act to amend Chapter 76 of the Acts of 1860, an act to incorporate the Associated Alumni of Acadia College. Bill number 48, an act to amend Chapter 72 of the Acts of 1897, the Lunenburg Common Lands Act. Bill number 51, an act to establish the Dr. Jack Crosby Memorial Addictions Trust Fund.
Order these bills be referred to the Committee on Private and Local Bills. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, please call the order of business public bills for second reading.
Public bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 1, the Firefighters Compensation Act?
Bill number 1, the Firefighters Compensation Act. The Honourable Member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I just had a few brief comments to make on this. Mr. Speaker, we're all pleased to see that better protection is going to be provided to our firefighters under the Workers' Compensation Act, especially in dealing with cancer's cause and in their line of duties. Mr. Speaker, I just want to reiterate, I know that my colleague from Cape Breton West has spoken at length on this, and as a result of the concerns he's raised, I had the opportunity to speak with a number of fire chiefs in Richmond County. Mr. Speaker, Richmond County, like many other counties in the province, is set up in a way that the municipality collects a rate for the volunteer fire departments, but it's the departments themselves that govern their finances and determine where they are going to make purchases and what sort of coverage they are going to have. Speaker, the unfortunate part is that, from my understanding, and I will be confirming that in the days coming ahead, it was my understanding from one of the chiefs that it was his belief that not one of the volunteer fire departments in Richmond County use workers' compensation as their insurance, and the reason for that is because they just simply cannot afford the premiums charged under the workers' compensation system. They're forced to go out and look for private insurers. And I would say it's not only a situation in Richmond, because we heard just a few weeks ago where the Port Hood Fire Department was also raising concerns about how their private insurer had gone up, but they too were using private insurance. Now, Speaker, the concern that I raise here is that while this is good for workers' compensation, this will not directly benefit the volunteer firefighters in Richmond County who put their lives on the line and work very hard to protect the people of Richmond County in these situations. And the reason for that is the departments have made a decision they simply just cannot afford workers' compensation premiums. Therefore, I want to take this opportunity to call upon the Minister to see whether, after these changes are implemented, if he is willing to look into the cost of the premiums charged to these volunteer fire departments, especially in municipal units where it is the departments themselves that are forced to go out and find the coverage for their members, and it's not the municipalities themselves that are paying for this. So it is a concern, because when I asked the chiefs, well, because there will be this added coverage provided for volunteer firefighters, will it make a difference? And the response was, the premiums aren't going to change. We couldn't afford them yesterday. Even though they changed the benefits, we won't be able to afford them tomorrow unless there is something done about the rate and the premiums that are being charged to volunteer fire departments, such as the ones we have in Richmond. So I just want to red flag this again for the Minister, that while this is an important step, there is a significant amount of volunteer firefighters in Richmond and in other areas of the province that will not stand to benefit from this, because they simply just cannot afford the current premiums being charged to them under workers' compensation. So I do hope the Minister will be willing to have a look at this to see what can be done in conjunction with these departments, so that we can do everything possible to ensure that all of our firefighters, volunteer or paid, can enjoy the additional protection and benefits being offered under this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, a member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be brief. I want to say that I think this is a positive move on the part of the government. I sincerely hope that it will be received as such. Our caucus does have some reservations. I'll ditto the comments by the member for Richmond. I want the government to be aware that in my constituency, I think there's somewhere in the range of 5 different volunteer fire departments. To my knowledge, there's only one of those that actually has has full-time paid people, and the rest would, even in that department, would be all volunteer, and for all the other departments, they would be purely volunteer. And I think I've stated in the House earlier, actually, certainly yesterday, that the incident of a firefighter injured in the course of doing his work, and a volunteer on top of that, and actually because he was injured on a call, when the ambulance took him to the hospital, he was charged $500 fee, and so. To me, this is the point of ridiculousness. If ever there was a case of adding insult to injury, that is it. And although I think the Department of Health actually helped them out with this, which I was glad to see, but the fact that the service provider was willing to bill them, I thought was ridiculous. So in light of that, I want the government to think seriously about the impacts, negative impacts on these people who offer themselves as volunteers for the benefit of the residents in their communities. And I certainly would expect that in practically all of the fire departments that would be in my constituency, that there would be no workers' comp paid, and I'll actually ask some questions about that, and I would be very surprised. They really, for the most part, some of them, they're lucky to be able to afford to have the equipment they need, let alone the added expense for workers' compensation. So I think I would be right, or I'd be accurate in saying that it's just not in the realm of possibilities that these volunteer firefighters who are cash-strapped anytime would have the resources to be paying into workers' comp, and I would see that as a necessary component to compensation in this regard. So we're glad to see some retroactivity in this act, and we may have some more comments or amendments as this bill moves forward, Mr. Speaker. But we do definitely see this as a positive step on the part of the government, and it's certainly it's none too soon, but certainly appropriate. So thank you.
Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader to close debate on Bill number 1. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'm truly delighted to move second reading of Bill number 1. I think it is a giant step forward in protection for firefighters, in particular volunteer firefighters. And Mr. Speaker, heaven only knows we do have to support the volunteer fire service in this province whenever we have the opportunity, because, Mr. Speaker, those people perform an invaluable service that I doubt very much if government, even though some people in this chamber believe government can do everything, I don't think government could replicate the service that is provided by volunteer firefighters. With regard to premiums, Mr. Speaker, the majority, and I was trying desperately to go through my notes here and I can't find it, but I believe the majority of volunteer firefighters at the present time are covered under workers' compensation. The majority of professional firefighters are not. So there is a difference there, and the professional firefighters now have, I assume, and in the next round of negotiations, will have the opportunity, if they want to change their carrier from their present private carrier to workers' compensation. The rates charged by workers' compensation for volunteer firefighters, Mr. Speaker, is not a particularly high rate, but however, it is, depending on the size of the department, Mr. Speaker, it's still a cost. And Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that members who have within their ridings small volunteer firefighting companies, that they approach their local municipality to cover them as an extension of their present coverage that they have on the workers in their municipal office, and that is possible. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I thank you very much, and everybody in the House, and I look for, once again, this bill to proceed right along. Mr. Speaker, second reading.
Motion is for second reading of Bill number 1. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 1, an act to provide compensation for full-time and volunteer firefighters who suffer from an occupational disease.
Order this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 43, the Members Retiring Allowances Act?
Bill number 43, Members Retiring Allowance Act. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move second reading of Bill number 43.
Bill number 43. House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 43, an act to amend Chapter 282 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Members Retiring Allowances Act.
Bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 28, the Apprenticeship and Trades Qualifications Act?
Bill number 28, the Apprenticeship and Trades Qualifications Act. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I move that this bill be now read the second time. Mr. Speaker, we're considering this bill when apprenticeship is celebrating its 66th year in Nova Scotia. We have more than 4,800 active apprentices registered in our province in 53 designated trades. The revisions to Bill 28 will allow for even more improvements to take place. They will enable Nova Scotians to access a spectrum of lifelong learning, including youth apprenticeship, pre-employment, essential skills training, upgrading, and skills enhancement. Tradespeople who are already certified will benefit from the revisions we're introducing. They will have the opportunity to enhance their trade skills through refresher courses and essential skills assessment and training. Those who have worked in a skilled trade for a significant period of time without certification will have the opportunity to acquire the necessary essential skills that will help them to pass the certification examinations. Essential skills programs help workers improve their reading, writing, math, basic computer, critical thinking, problem solving, oral communication, and teamwork skills on the job. All the essential skills apprentices need to continue to be a valuable part of our workforce. The essential skills assessment will ensure that apprentices and trades qualifiers will write the exams who write the exams will be better prepared and that they will have the skills required to participate successfully in their chosen fields. The updated legislation lays the groundwork for youth apprenticeship to get young people on track earlier for careers in skilled trades. Through youth apprenticeship, Nova Scotia's youth will be able to learn while they earn and prepare for careers in skilled trades. It will provide participants the opportunity to obtain credits toward high school completion, post-secondary programs, and practical hours in their chosen trades programs. Assessments will also be done for those experienced trades people who want to access certification examinations to become a journey person without going through the apprenticeship system. These initiatives encourage our tradespeople to keep their skills current in a cycle of lifelong learning, which will make their work more meaningful and rewarding. At the same time, they will continue to have a vital role as part of our workforce, contributing to a prosperous society. Mr. Speaker, the revisions of this bill honor commitments in strong leadership, a clear course. They establish a comprehensive and modern apprenticeship program in consultation with our partners in business, labor, industry, and training. Additionally, improvements to the apprenticeship program are part of the Skills Nova Scotia initiative. The revisions of the apprenticeship legislation are based on the public consultations led by Carol McCullough and Jim Henley and our partners in business, labor, industry, and training. Mr. Speaker, employers play a key role in helping apprentices acquire skills training. There are more than 3,000 employers who participate in the provincial apprenticeship program. 85% of apprenticeship training is done on the job and 15% in the classroom. The revisions will provide an opportunity for our partners to become more closely involved with apprenticeship. The strength of the apprenticeship system is found in the quality of relationships between the partners that support it, and we are fortifying Nova Scotia's apprenticeship system through the revisions through this bill. The involvement of business, labor, and industry will mean a strong apprenticeship system which will help our economy grow. Mr. Speaker, the revisions to the Apprenticeship and Trades Qualification Act are good for the apprenticeship system, for further development of our workforce, for employers, but most of all for apprentices. The revisions will create more opportunities for Nova Scotians to pursue skills, training, and employment opportunities right here at home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for bringing forth these revisions. After all, we all know in many cases we've waited for many long years for these improvements. And I want you to know that last evening I had the occasion to attend an event attended by the Metro Locals of the Teachers Union here within the HRM. At that time, around the discussion table, we were talking about some of the alternatives, particularly important when we look at the fact that in certain trades, we are in need of having tradespeople there to be able to supply the services. I can mention the chef business in particular, I can mention plumbing, bricklaying, and so on. stakeholders from business, labor, and of course industry have been involved in the process. That's a credit to the process. That's a credit to the minister. The response, of course, will be interesting to see as we move forward to law amendments. And when we go to law amendments, I'm sure that we're going to hear from presenters, perhaps to a degree, on the topic of fees. But then again, we should look at the progressive step that has been taken. It is a step that, at this stage, I look forward to going through to law amendments and hearing from the people involved in the process. At times, we have been sadly lacking in the public school system on this issue because of preparing young people for these much-needed trades. There are, without doubt, a number of vacancies as more and more older tradespeople look forward to eventual retirement. And the initiative particularly directed towards youth apprenticeship is one that I look forward to getting more details on. Young people who will have the opportunity to be able to refine the skills necessary to be able to pass the important examinations for certification and to be able to move into the workforce in a meaningful way. So we look forward to law amendments, and I thank the minister for bringing it forth at this time.
Thank you. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal caucus will also look forward toward hearing more at the Law Amendments Committee, Mr. Speaker. It's important, of course, that young Nova Scotians will get better trades training through improvements in the apprenticeship program. But there is a concern, Mr. Speaker, there is a concern with the fees for training, the fees for exams, and the fees for certifications as well. Mr. Speaker, there are many Nova Scotians who want to become tradespeople who will soon be paying higher fees because the province is expanding its apprenticeship program for industries such as construction. So there are a great deal of concerns here, Mr. Speaker, and again, on behalf of the Liberal caucus, we share some of those concerns, especially about fee increases. We look forward to hearing more from the people who are affected most by this during the Law Amendments Committee, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the honourable Minister of Education to close debate on Bill number 28.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable members for their comments. And I can, Mr. Speaker, say to those members and members of the House that there was considerable consultation occurred with respect to the fee structure that accompanies the proposals in this legislation. And we feel very confident that the participants in this program will find that the fees are appropriate to the programs and indeed will still be among the lowest fees in the country for apprenticeship programs. And I believe that the considerable consultation that occurred will result in people seeing the reasonableness of the fee structure as it is proposed. I thank the honourable members for their comments and intention of support for the legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Motion is for second reading of Bill number 28. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 28, an act respecting apprenticeship and trades qualifications.
Order this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, that concludes the government's business for today. I move the House to now rise to meet again on Monday at the hour. Not really, but we'll go a certain way along that, yes. We'll meet again on Monday, Mr. Speaker, at the hour of 2 p.m. and sit until 10 p.m. The order of business will be public bills for second reading and committee of the whole House on bills. And Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday we'll sit from 12 until 8, and Wednesday will be 2 until 6. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move the adjournment.
Motion is the House adjourned to 2 p.m. on Monday. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried. We are adjourned.